Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wobbly94. I hope you're doing well today. I have another book review for you for a book, yeah. So, this is They Thirst by Robert McCammon, and this is a great looking cover. Really, really love this. Look at that close-up, man. Look at that moon. Very Fright Night-like in a lot of ways. Very 1980s. I really like that. This is the writer who brought us one of my favorite books of all time, Swan Song. Swan Song is incredible. It's a post-apocalyptic book that starts a little bit before the apocalypse. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. One of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I will stand by that until the day I die. One of the greatest horror novels I've ever read in my entire life. I have many copies of Swan Song. With They Thirst, I happen to accidentally have two because there's the one I got in a lot with about 3 other books I didn't own of Robert McCammon. And then I bought this one originally by itself. Just, you know, because it was there and I didn't know anything about it otherwise. They Thirst is a mess. Now, I've only read 3 books from Robert McCammon in my life. One is Boy's Life, which I did not enjoy, but I was in my high school years, so I don't really think I was at the age yet where I could really appreciate that book for what it was. I want to reread that sometime, so I might be looking for a copy of that one day. Anyway, They Thirst is a vampire story. Very Fright Night-like, as I said. However, I've been reading this book forever. I've been reading this book for like 5 months because I just could not, for the life of me, get into it. I just couldn't, and I was struggling really bad with this. I had a lot of other obligations between work and my marriage and so many different things I wanted to do as side hobbies. Of course, I have my kind of main YouTube channel where I review Goosebumps books. I've worked on some other movie channel type stuff that I wanted to work on there for a while, kind of off and on. I've had a lot of other obligations I wanted to do. Of course, we're getting into summertime, so there's a lot less time because of activities outside of work. It's been kind of a trip. And on top of all of that, I had a kitchen renovation. So I didn't really have the time to sit down and read this piece of crap. I struggled forever to try to get through this. And every time I picked it up, I just immediately had this overcoming feeling that I didn't want to read this. That it isn't for me. Anyway, They Thirst. What is They Thirst about? This is essentially a retelling of Dracula, but with a different setting, different characters that are partially named after certain characters from the Dracula novel from Bram Stoker. To me, it is so close to stealing the formula of Dracula that it might as well be like Dracula 1988 or something should be the title. So essentially you have Los Angeles, which is where our whole book is pretty much set, aside from the prologue about a young boy and his mom. In this storyline, we're in LA, and we follow too many new characters. Way too many characters. This book does not need to be 550 pages, or 560, whatever it is. It's too long. It's just a too long book. There's not enough happening here, not enough engaging moments for this to be as long as it is. This book is 560 pages, and it takes forever to get us to our finale. And then the finale is wrapped up too quick. Anyway, essentially in LA, in Hollywood, some weird things are starting to happen here. Hollywood is already a horrible, weird place, you know, as we know in recent years, but this particular situation is about a serial killer called the Roach, who is kidnapping particularly women, prostitutes, that type of thing, murdering them, stuffing their faces and stuff with roaches. I think particularly their mouth. Yeah, there's also somebody going around and stealing bodies from cemeteries, particularly in one area that I thought was very eerie. There is one cemetery, it's a very famous cemetery of, like, you know, dead actors and actresses and that kind of thing. And somebody goes there and digs up a lot of the coffins, but all they do are essentially leave the bodies and take the coffins. Very peculiar, I can't say it. Very peculiar. It's a very odd situation. The cops are kind of stumped. And we follow one particular cop that is in the prologue of the book named Andy Paladazin, I think is his name. And it irritates me because every time he's on screen, they call him Paladazin. Every time he's gone, people are calling him Andy. So I got very confused very quickly because I just got to the point, again, like I said, didn't care about this book. I think he's a chief or something. He's some kind of big leadership in copdom. And he has some pretty horrific experiences back in the day, and some things kind of lead him, particularly some nightmarish visions of his mother who passed away. lead him to wonder if the vampires who came to torment him and had killed his dad back when he was a young boy in our prologue, he kind of wonders if they've come back to L.A. or come to L.A. for the first time because of all these weird occurrences that are taking place. He is very much the kind of religiously motivated Van Helsing of this book, without being entirely Van Helsing. I don't really remember Dracula as a book well enough to know which character he reminds me the most of, but it's kind of that character, kind of split up with another character in here. Now we follow some other characters in here. There is one named, basically Father Silvera, I think is his name. He's a Catholic priest, and he's cool, but he's also tough, but he also makes no sense as a character. Like, if people knew that you were going around as a Catholic priest and beating up people, like bad guys, there is more than likely there are people who would force you to retire from that position because they would say you're being a brute, that kind of thing. I don't see that happening. It's not realistic, but I'm not expecting a vampire book to be realistic, you know? But this one's trying very hard to be in that realism area. You know, it wants to be deeply. We have a reporter in here who we kind of follow. I forgot her name. I don't care. I think it's like Lottie. I don't know. She's not important. She's barely in the book. Let's see. Who else do we follow? We follow one kid who's a younger guy who's an actor named Wes and his girlfriend Solange. And does it sound like I'm bored talking about these characters? That's because I am. There's nothing to any of these characters. They have their circumstances. They have their different types of personalities, but they're not good characters. They're not good for protagonism. You know what I mean? They're not intriguing enough. They don't have... I don't know. I wish Andy, the cop that had the vampires attack him when he was a kid, I wish that we had him as our main focus the entire book, entirely, because everybody else gets in the way, in my opinion, for the novel, the way it's trying to work here. Everybody else is getting in the way. There's too much going on here, while also at the same time not enough happening. I think the vampire setup is the biggest sin of this book, because it leads to almost nothing. It leads to almost nothing at all. And the formula for Dracula in here basically makes it so close to the chest that you know exactly what's going to happen with this. There is no changing things up. There is no trying to have some twists here and there. It is the most boring retelling of Dracula I've ever read in my life. Which Dracula itself, the Bram Stoker novel, I don't even like that much. I think that's boring too. That could possibly be more boring than this book. I don't really know. I love Robert McCammon, but I'm dumbfounded how he put this book together, especially with something like Swan Song, which apparently Robert McCammon, by the way, has written off the earlier 4 or 5 books of his career, and this is one of them, saying that he thought they were poor and they don't hold up at all. Dude, I don't know how this would have held up in the 80s. I'll be honest with you. This one's a mess. It is an absolute mess. Now, there are some things in here, I do want to say this. There are some things about this book that I do enjoy. I think the writing is Robert McCammon-esque. It's not up to the par of Swan Song yet, but you can see that coming down the road, right? That looks good. That's fine, what I read in the story from his own prose. However, I will say this. I do think that there are some concepts in here revolving around, well, for example, the idea and how the vampires work, certain things about them, the qualities of them. I really, really love that. I think the vampires themselves, when they're on the screen, well, in this case on the page, they're cool. I really like them. I think it would have worked. I like the overall concept of the vampires coming in to invade basically Hollywood and trying to build up like an army. That's pretty cool. There is a leader to the vampires named Prince Vulcan. And I'm not going to tell you too much about him because I don't want to ruin too much for you. Prince Vulcan is the most embarrassing villain I have ever read. He is absolutely embarrassing. If you've read this book, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about and where I'm coming from that. He's so childish. He's so goofy, you know? And I'm not expecting this book, again, to be a very realistic depiction of vampires. I'm not, but it's trying to be. But I don't expect it to be. Prince Vulcan is one of the worst villains I've ever seen Robert McCammon write. Out of the 3 books I've read from this man. I'm not a big fan of Boy's Life, as I said. But I think Boy's Life is better than this book, for sure. This one is such a hot mess, it's just dull. It's just an absolute dull read with no engagement whatsoever, and I'm really sad to say that because I was really excited to read this back when I picked it up months ago. That's kind of where I've been for so long with this channel, and why I just recently came back to review some stuff I had kind of started to review before I read this book. And with this book, I just could not, for the life of me, get into it. I struggled deeply, you know? If you've read They Thirst, I would love to hear what you have to say about it down below. There are some positives in here, but they are so thin. I don't even know how to put it into words. They are so thin and so minuscule compared to everything else that I had to deal with in this book that I struggled deeply reading this, if you couldn't tell. This was a mess. This was a mess. I do not recommend it at all. If you're a Robert McCammon fan and collector, maybe to you guys. If you're a deep, hardcore collector, but if you're like myself and you just like reading horror books that can be scary or fun, there is no scariness to this. There is no fun to this. And like I said, it's wrapped up so quick in like a 30-page span that it's just completely unimpressive. Completely unimpressive. You'll be more angry, I think, than anything. It dumbfounded me. For a 560-page book, They Thirst is an absolute mess. I don't care how cool the cover is. This is so sad to see how awful this book was. I don't even have words for it. Now again, if I find some things that I genuinely love and genuinely think are cool about a book, I can't give it like the lowest rating I have. But when it comes to They Thirst, and the very few minuscule qualities that I do like about it, if I had to rate this one on a 5-star basis, I'd give it a 2 out of 5 stars. I do not recommend it. This is a very borderline, almost 1 out of 5, but it's a 2 out of 5 because I like the vampire style. I like the different things they do with vampires here. I think Robert McCammon has some really cool ideas that he put into this book, but man, it's so long. This is not necessary to have this many characters. I know it doesn't sound like I had many that I mentioned, but there's a lot of other ones, some side characters that come into the story that are not important at all and have no worth to the point where I shouldn't even mention them. One of them being a child, and it drove me nuts. I've complained to my wife constantly about how I did not want to read this. And yesterday I was just done. I was like, you know what? I wanted to get the last 50 pages out of the way. I'm going to burn through it real quick. And I did that, thank God. And it's over with after about an hour of that. Thank God. Anyway, They Thirst. What did you guys think about it? Put your thoughts and comments down below, folks. I would love to hear what you have to say about this piece of crap. Did you hate it as much as I did? Do you love this book? Why? Why? I would love to hear what you have to say down below. Now, this is another thing. It's the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July. And another thing, too, if my mom happens to be watching this, Mom, happy birthday. I love you. Yeah, she was born on 4th of July. That's pretty sick. Anyway, thank you guys for watching once again, and God bless you. Happy 4th, and goodbye.